All right, well, thank you all for coming back from break. Our next session is going to be looking at policy solutions. So I think in a number of conversations today, we've touched on or gotten close to that topic. And so now we're just going to dive in deep. And I'm before we start this session, I wanted to say, first off, if asking questions, maybe asking them out loud is not your favorite way of doing things. Cool thing about the Whova app is you can ask questions in the session on the Whova app, and there is somebody in the back of the room looking at that who can bring them up on the microphone. In fact, they just waved their hand. So if that's a barrier for you engaging, which is fully understandable, it's kind of weird putting a microphone in your face, that's an option for you. But with that, I am very, very pleased to announce our next session moderator, Kristi Lieske. Kristi is the ocean planner for the Delaware Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Control's Delaware Coastal Programs, where she works to address a variety of ocean issues. Currently, she is leading the effort to develop an ocean and bay plan for the state, which we're all very excited about. Kristi also advances regional ocean planning efforts through participation in Marco Management Board and multiple work groups. Prior to her position with the state, Kristi spent 7 years studying biological control methods for invasive insects on the campus of her alma mater, the University of Delaware. So welcome to the stage.
Thank you so much for that really wonderful introduction. Now I feel bad because I wasn't going to read the full bios of these awesome speakers and presenters, but they are on Whova, so please go look at them because they all are amazing and you should know all about them. But it just is going to take too long and cut into our really awesome session. So we have a lot of really leading voices here in the Mid-Atlantic talking about policies to address marine debris. As Will said, we've touched on it a lot today. Each session, each collaborative session has started out talking about some environmental issues or challenges that we're facing, and it all moves into, okay, what do we do from here? How do we get it into legislators' hands? And that's a question I get all the time. In my role, the regulators of my department will come to me and be like, okay, we just learned about this thing and all the havoc that it's wrecking. What do we do now? How can you help me get this into policy, into a thing that we can actually implement? And I'm always like, I don't know. I'll let you know when I find out. So here we are at this awesome session where we are going to find out how policy is evolving, from national insights in the United States of Plastic Report to state-level actions like extended producer responsibility and balloon bans that are driving real change across the Mid-Atlantic. So our first speaker is going to be Angela Noakes. She's a plastic policy analyst from Ocean Conservancy. And then we'll have Steve Raabe, owner of Opinion Works. And then we have Christina Trapani, executive director of Clean Virginia Waterways, along with Joseph Barnes, the Marine Debris Fellow at Virginia Sea Grant. And then finally, to wrap it up, and please stay for this because Cynthia is very animated and very, very awesome to present. Cynthia Seibold, executive director and founder of Balloon Mission. So I'll turn it over to Angela first.
Thanks for having me here today. As Kristi introduced me, I'm Angela Noakes. I'm a plastics policy analyst at Ocean Conservancy. And I'm going to be actually covering two topics for you today, but I will try to keep it concise. I'm going to be talking about our United States of Plastics report and how it could be a roadmap for reducing plastic pollution. And then at the end, I'm going to do a quick 101 on extended producer responsibility to help lead into our next speaker. So first, to tell you a little bit about Ocean Conservancy. At Ocean Conservancy, we are working towards a healthy ocean and a thriving planet forever and for everyone. And we do this by uniting science, people, and policy to protect our ocean today and for generations to come. We do this by tackling some of the biggest challenges facing our ocean, including by advancing climate solutions, protecting biodiversity, and ending ocean plastics. And a really important part of our work to end ocean plastics, which I hope many of you here are familiar with, is the International Coastal Cleanup. It's celebrating its 40th anniversary this year, and in that time, it's mobilized over 19 million volunteers to remove over 400 million pounds of trash. And there's a lot of things we love about the ICC, but one that's particularly important to the report I'm going to talk about is the data collection. So volunteers at cleanups log what they find, which is fed into our online open access database, the TIDES database. And that information is really helpful to inform policy, research, and behavior campaigns and more. And I know I use this resource all the time in my work. And my colleague Sarah Weller from our ICC team is here in the back. So we're always happy to talk about the ICC. And then also we work on plastics policy, which is my focus at Ocean Conservancy. Our goal is to prevent plastics from becoming pollution in the first place. So we do this by eliminating problematic plastics, holding producers financially accountable for the plastics they're generating, and reducing single-use plastics overall. This year, we released our United States of Plastics report for the first time, and in this, we looked at state laws passed to address plastic pollution across all 50 states and DC. And the goal of this was to create a snapshot of the progress that's happened to date and to hopefully provide some inspiration for future action. And to do this, we looked specifically at laws on the books across 4 different categories: single-use plastics, microplastics, reduction and reuse, and producer accountability and recycling. And then for the scoring, we also took into account recycling access and recycling rate, which we took from the Recycling Partnership's 2024 State of Residential Recycling Report. For each state, we also included the top 10 most commonly collected items from the International Coastal Cleanup. This wasn't part of the score, but it was something that we found really important to provide that local data and perspective on the particular conditions in that state. One thing to take into consideration while reviewing the report is that we did not include local or executive level actions in our scoring, and we also didn't look at effectiveness. We know those are incredibly important to driving change, but we weren't able to score it mostly because of limited capacity and the limited tools available to track that. So what we did with all of this data was we created a scoring scale from 0 to 5 stars, from needs improvement to excellent. And again, this goal was to create this snapshot of where states were. No state received 5 stars this year. We're hoping that will change, but that reflects how much progress we can make. And to give you an example of what it looks like, I pulled Delaware's page because that's where we are. I'm pretty sure this view is down the road from us right now. And on the first page here, we have a snapshot of where the state is, its progress across the different criteria we looked at. There were about 20, so this kind of just gives you progress and the state score. Have a little more detail on the laws that the state has passed, the top 10 ICC items, and then recommendations for future action in the state. For some states, we also have case studies, and these are things where we wanted to highlight progress, but maybe things that didn't fit quite in our scoring rubric. So you'll see those for a couple states. We didn't have one for Delaware, but I'd love to hear about a case study for Delaware for a future report. So what did we find? Overall, the results of the report are disappointing but not surprising. The national average score is 1.5 out of 5 stars or needs improvement, and nearly 90% of states are falling short of that 3-star good level. Overall, we know that states have proven to be leaders in passing laws to reduce plastic pollution, but we know there's more work to be done across the country. And our hope is this report will help identify opportunities for further action, including where states can learn from each other. And here is a snapshot of some of the national trends we found. We've seen a lot of states taking action on single-use plastics, as well as some encouraging numbers on funding for reuse and reduction. We've also seen 7 states pass laws for extended producer responsibility for packaging just in the past few years. And we were also seeing that laws are being passed that can hinder progress. So these are laws that prevent local action on single-use plastics, or that support harmful chemical recycling technologies. I don't have time to go into detail on all of that here, but please come by me after if you want to talk about that. And then here, I just zoomed in on the Mid-Atlantic. I'll note that in our report, we organize states by watershed. So for our friends in New York, you will find your state in the Great Lakes but I pulled you all together here in the Mid-Atlantic just to pull everyone who's participating in MARCO together. And you'll see that every state in this region is at or above the national average, and there's been a lot of progress, particularly on single-use plastics. So you have 6 out of 6 jurisdictions with bans on expanded polystyrene foodware. We have bans on single-use plastic bags, laws on single-use plastic straws, and then there's also some examples of laws on cigarette butts, cutlery, and hotel toiletries in this region. And the areas where there's the most room for improvement are microplastics, reduction and reuse, producer accountability and recycling, with just a couple of laws passed in the region on these. There are also examples where policies can hinder progress in the region, so we know that overall there's a lot of opportunities for continued progress across the board. So to close out on United States of Plastics, the takeaway from this report is that there is real momentum to address plastic pollution across the country, but there is also more work that needs to be done in every state, and every state has room to improve. The 2 biggest areas for improvement we saw nationwide were supporting reuse systems and addressing microplastic pollution. And here is a QR code to the report. We also have fact sheets at our table, and we have printouts for each of the Mid-Atlantic states. Also on our website, we have a fact sheet for every state, so if you aren't on our table, you can find it online. And now I'm going to go into extended producer responsibility. Steve Raabe is going to be talking about EPR in a little bit, so we thought I would just give a little bit of a background on what that is. So for anyone not familiar with extended producer responsibility, often called EPR, this policy approach shifts the responsibility of end-of-life management from local governments and taxpayers to the producers of those products. And particularly for plastics and packaging, this is a great opportunity to restructure the economy around these materials. So since 2021, we've seen 7 states pass EPR laws for packaging. Maryland in the Mid-Atlantic was one of the states that passed this law this year. And there's also 10 states with deposit return systems for beverage containers. These are also called bottle bills. It's where consumers pay a deposit when they purchase a beverage container and then retrieve that deposit once they return it for recycling. This is another form of EPR, and many of these are long-standing programs. And despite representing just over a quarter of the country, these deposit return programs are responsible for about 50% of aluminum can and glass bottle recycling and 60% of all PET bottles recycled. So they're a really powerful tool for driving those rates. Every state is a little different in how EPR works, but this is just a really simplified flow. So you have a legislature define the goals. Oftentimes state agencies will be tasked with expanding on those goals. Then a needs assessment is developed that looks at waste management systems in the state, the current state of it, and then improvements that are needed to meet the goals that have been defined by the legislature or the state agencies. A producer responsibility organization, or PRO, is formed by the producers of covered materials to run the program and meet the goals that have been outlined by the legislature. The formation of the organization and its plan and budget are often approved by the state agency, so you have that state oversight. Once the plan and budget are met, the producer responsibility organization works to implement it and to achieve and maintain the targets. And these targets play a really important role to the goals that EPR will accomplish. So there's a lot of different flavors of EPR. And how those goals and the targets are defined really help determine the outcomes and whether it's going to provide the benefits. Which here are some examples of those benefits. So for consumers, we see improved and more equitable access to reuse and recycling, also reduced confusion and more uniform rules across the state. So a lot of times when you move from even city to city, you have different rules for what's recyclable, how to recycle it. Extended producer responsibility helps create that more uniform system, so you have more predictability for consumers. Costs are shifted from local governments to producers of packaging. In the environment, you have improved upstream reduction and redesign, which can help decrease pollution, as well as improved recycling rates. And for producers, there's improved access to post-consumer recycled content to meet their goals around that, and to level the playing field with competitors so that everyone is playing by the same set of rules. Ocean Conservancy has a toolkit on comprehensive extended producer responsibility. I'm not going to go into too much detail, don't worry. But what this does is it outlines a comprehensive approach to EPR that will help drive the best environmental outcomes. And so what this does is it combines extended producer responsibility for packaging, deposit return systems for beverage containers, and source reduction for single-use plastics into a single policy that can help drive environmental outcomes. So we have a toolkit, we have an appendix, we have model legislation, we have a section by section. All of this is available on our website. And the last thing I'll leave you with on EPR is these 10 principles for EPR to reduce plastic pollution that we have at the end of our toolkit. So as I mentioned earlier, the benefits of EPR really depend on how the program's designed. So we have these 10 principles. I'm not going to go through them all, but I want to highlight 4 for you. The first is reduction and reuse targets. So we know we can't recycle our way out of the plastic pollution crisis, and we need to make and use less plastics. And EPR can be a powerful tool to help achieve that through single-use plastic reduction targets and reuse targets. The next point is comprehensive. So by implementing EPR and DRS and source reduction, that was a lot of acronyms, by combining those together, we can achieve the best environmental outcomes, including reducing overall plastic pollution. For redesign, these policies can help drive redesign of products by requiring that all packaging, paper products, and beverage containers be designed to be reusable, recyclable, or compostable. And the last one that I'll mention is plastics recycling. We know how we recycle matters, and EPR policies should have strong standards to ensure that recycling is reducing the need for virgin plastics and the materials are being sent to responsible end markets. And with that, I'll leave you here with a QR code to our plastics policy page on our website. This has a bunch of our resources. Stay tuned, we are adding a lot more to this website. I'm really excited about it, and we have more resources at our table. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm Steve Raabe with OpinionWorks. I'm going to share with you some of the public opinion that informs what we just heard. Where's the public on these questions of producer responsibility? So our credentials are here. I don't know why I put this in the deck. That was really silly. But we work a lot on public opinion. I got my start doing political polling, years ago. And so I still bring that ability to look at the public, and that's the lens through which we're looking right now, is does the public support these policies, and if so, by how much? So I want to give you 3 big observations from a public opinion standpoint. The first is that the public is really worried, acutely worried about plastics in the environment. I want to illustrate that in a couple of ways. This is from the regional study, the survey that we did for Marco last year that spans our 5 states. So this is statewide across all 5 of our states. And we asked people, how often, if ever, do you worry about the problem of plastics getting into the environment? 80% of the public across our 5 states said that they worry about this. 37% said often. But we also asked them to look at some different threats. Some of these are environmental, some of these are things like inflation and the cost of living, or crime, or immigration. So these are things that are very much in the public dialogue. This study was done in April of '24 in the midst of the presidential election when we were hearing a lot about the cost of living as we do now. It's amazing to me, and this is a consistent finding, that plastics in the ocean ranks as high as a problem in the public's mind as inflation and the cost of living. I mean, it blows you away. Now, we heard things this morning about nanoplastics and how they're infiltrating our bodies, and I think that's what the public is worried about. And when we do focus groups on any number of environmental topics, the subject of plastics almost always comes up. It doesn't matter if we're researching clean air or land conservation or whatever it may be. People bring up plastics floating in the ocean. It is a preoccupation. So this worry, this concern that the public has about plastics in our environment is animating the public policy numbers that I'm going to show you. It helps explain why people feel the way they do. These are just some quotes. I won't necessarily read them out to you. I highlighted some colorful things that people said in these recent interviews. This was done for Clean Virginia Waterways, in fact, back in 2022. I think the results would be the same today. I mean, we interviewed some people in one-on-one in-depth interviews, and they talked about their feelings about plastic getting into their food supply. Helen's quote, "I don't want to put that in my body. We are what we eat, and we're all interconnected. What we put into the ocean comes back to us. That summarizes what a lot of people think, and it helps you understand the tremendous energy that lies behind some of these public opinion numbers that you're about to see. For the Long Island Sound Partnership, we conducted a study last year about perceptions of Long Island Sound. It's relevant here because we asked people if they do anything in their daily life that might hurt the quality of the water in the Sound. Set aside the fact that a very small percentage of people said that they do. But those people that could perceive that they might be doing things on a day-to-day basis that's hurting water quality in the Sound were asked, what do you do? And it was a open-ended question, and we've just categorized what they said. And, you know, it's typical. This is a typical finding. What the arrows are pointing you to some of the leading ideas. Littering and creating garbage, mentioned by 34%. Plastics and using too much of it, 9%. So people, when you ask them what they're doing environmentally that hurts, a lot of what people talk about is consumption, and particularly plastic consumption or littering or creating waste. People are very worried about landfills filling up. So all of this stuff, again, is what's on people's minds, and it helps you understand how they're deciding what public policies they might support. So observation 2 is, despite this level of concern, maybe panic, you know, in the public's mind, there is optimism, actually, when it comes to plastics. It surprised me, but we did a study for the Recycling Partnership. It happened to be in Texas and Louisiana. So it's the Gulf Coast, you know, and some norms are different there, but I think the finding would probably be similar if we were here in the Mid-Atlantic with a study like this. But we asked them this question, agree or disagree. It is too late to solve the plastic pollution problem. 62% of the people that we interviewed disagreed with that. A lot of people are not sure, 23%, but only 17%, 1 out of 6 people agree it's too late. So there's still some optimism out there in the public that we can do something about this. How about this? If people recycle more, will that help address the problem of plastic pollution? And the result in this region, the Gulf Coast, is overwhelming. 77% said yes. So recycling, one of the pillars of the EPR, is part of the solution, not the only solution, but there's a lot of a sense out there in the public that this would help. But I have everything I need to do a good job of recycling. This is a national study we did for the Recycling Partnership as part of their Recycling Confidence Index, and only 61% agree with that proposition. A lot of people want their local recycling program to be better, and EPR at its heart in the states where it's passed is aimed at improving how recycling works. A lot of people have concerns about their recycling program. One of them, I just spent some time in Arkansas, Northwest Arkansas, where there's a conglomeration of Fortune 500 corporate headquarters. Who knew this? You know, not just Walmart, but there's a lot of highly educated people and people working and living in different communities across Northwest, and the recycling rules are different in each one of these local communities, and everybody's confused about it. So EPR is going to fix that. I mean, that's just one of those little benefits of it. So that's all set up to say, observation 3, this translates into strong support for public policy initiatives. So I'm going to show you some numbers, and I'm going to go through these quickly. The slide deck will be available to you afterwards, but I want to make a couple of points. Our 5 states are here: New York, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, from north to south on the slide. And to require producer responsibility legislation, which requires producers of products to help pay for local recycling programs, is supported by 2/3 or more in all 5 of our states. And look how consistent the finding is. There's strong support across the region. It's also significant that this support is nonpartisan, multi-partisan. So Democrats support it, Republicans support it. So 63% of Republicans support this legislation. The independent voters in our sample were just a little bit less supportive, but still a majority, 55%. So it crosses party lines, and oh, by the way, among people most likely to vote, which is that second bar, the high likelihood voters, it rises from an overall level of 66 up to 73. So people that are more tuned into the political process, more engaged, are more likely to be supportive. This guy, who was in one of those Clean Virginia Waterways interviews down in Hampton, Virginia, epitomizes one of the benefits. And he said, as a taxpayer, I think it's about time we enforce some of these things for these producers so that they can start picking up the slack. That is a great benefit, and that is part of the reason why it crosses party lines. No matter what your political flavor is, this is an appealing concept to you. Let's look at California, where SB 54 was passed in, 2022, I think? SB, roughly, 3 or 4 years ago, and it's being implemented now. They're kind of in full swing with it, and that's their EPR law. And the Harris organization did a poll looking at that in January 25, so 3 years after the law had been passed, and 81% of Californians were in favor of the law. So they are already seeing that law being implemented. It's already kind of coming out of the pipeline, and it's supported by 4 out of 5 Californians. Now, California, I mean, okay, but still, that's a very high level of support. Harris asked them what they would support, and this just illustrates that there's a step beyond recycling that a lot of people are hungry for. 63% would expand and improve recycling, 27% would eliminate single-use plastics, and so there's more that we can do beyond recycling, of course, we all know that. And then finally, I'm going to just roll through about 4 more quickies here in the Mid-Atlantic region just to show you where we are. Requiring less plastic in packaging. This was asked in Virginia for the Clean Virginia Waterways project in 2022, and you can see that's heavily supported and crosses all party lines. Testing water for microplastics and notifying the public. Look at the enormous support levels for that across the region. So people are very worried about this, and they want to see something like this happen. A 5-cent bottle return fee. Again, about 2/3 are in favor of bottle bills across our region, regardless. New York, where there is one, the support is significantly higher. In other words, the strongly favor bar is 45%, almost a majority all by itself. Banning plastic bags still commands a majority in 4 out of our 5 states and a plurality in 1 of our states, not to be named, that state, but it's not as popular as a bag fee would be. So bans versus fees, the market approach is a little more appealing to voters. And then finally, Christina, I'm setting you up. Banning the intentional release of balloons, again, gets very strong support numbers across the region, 60 to 65% depending on the state. So these measures that we're talking about, the public supports them. We just got to get our legislators to get on board with them is what it's all about. So thank you.
Okay, I got 3 screens to look at. How's everyone doing? It's the end of the day. This has been awesome. Thank you, Marco. Thank you for having me and Clean Virginia Waterways and all of us out here. So far, I've learned so much today, and I appreciate being here and not being responsible for anything. So my name is Christina Trapani. I'm the Executive Director at Clean Virginia Waterways. I want to acknowledge my co-presenter, Joseph Barnes, with the Virginia Sea Grant. And I also want to acknowledge my predecessors, founder of Clean Virginia Waterways and former Executive Director, Katie Register, who really was like in it to win it with this Virginia Marine Debris Reduction Plan. And then, of course, Zach Huntington, who is still hanging out with us and doing the Zach thing with all of his research and advocacy work. If you're not familiar with Clean Virginia Waterways, we are now based in Virginia Beach. We left Longwood University last year. And basically our mission is to help reduce the amount of plastic pollution in Virginia's waterways. From enhancing the health of Virginia's water resources through pollution prevention, education, and stewardship activities involving Virginians from the classroom to the boardroom. I know you could have read that, but I wanted to say it out loud. Okay, this is the one that I'm going to try not to trip up for you, Will, okay? We are partnered with the Virginia Coastal Zone Management Program on this project, the Virginia Marine Debris Reduction Plan. We have been since the beginning. The Virginia Coastal Zone Management Program is an organization that oversees intergovernmental agencies within the coastal zone in Virginia, working very closely with all of these different agencies and different issues that affect the coastal zone. They administered enforceable policies that protect coastal resources from the state level all the way down to the local level. with an annual program funding budget of $3 million from the NOAA Marine Debris Program. How did I do? I'm trying to keep everybody jazzed. Okay. And this photograph on this slide was in no way staged at the Virginia Marine Debris Summit. So what is our role as far as the Virginia Marine Debris Reduction Plan? Clean Virginia Waterways we are the primary grantee from the Virginia Coastal Zone Management Program for marine debris work. We coordinate and we help coordinate and implement the Virginia Marine Debris Reduction Plan. And we keep track of the progress, and we identify the needs, we look at the gaps. We work with about 70 partners, not just Virginia, but also, for example, the Ocean Conservancy, NOAA, and other federal agencies to implement this plan to help us reduce marine debris in Virginia. Okay. What is the purpose of this Virginia Marine Debris Reduction Plan? Are there any other states in the Mid-Atlantic that have a marine debris reduction plan, first of all? We were discussing this earlier. Okay, didn't think so. Just wanted to kind of point that out. So this plan provides a statewide roadmap for reducing marine debris in our state. It helps us to understand, prevent, and mitigate marine debris. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in the future, in the next couple of slides. We work really hard with our partners to kind of capture what they're doing, like what are their goals, what are their challenges, what kind of work do they want to do, what have they completed, what are they in the process of doing, and how does all that fit into the plan. I already mentioned gaps, looking at the different types of work that need to be done, and how are we going to fill in those gaps, who's going to do the work, who has the ability, the capacity to do that type of work. I'm going to get back to the socially, economically, and politically feasible actions as I talk about the plan, but that basically is the format for deciding on what types of actions can be taking place in Virginia and what fits into our plan. All right, the history. In 2011, the Virginia Coastal Zone Management Program, they decided that marine debris in Virginia was a high priority. So at that point in time, they worked with Katie Register to organize the first Virginia Marine Debris Summit, and that happened in 2013 at the Virginia Aquarium. And at that summit, all of the partners came together and decided what was the low-hanging fruit, i.e. the socially, politically, and fiscally sponsored, oh my gosh, the economically feasible types of marine debris that we could actually get to in a reasonable amount of time. For example, cigarette butts, plastic bags, balloons. These are things that we were already talking about, things that we kind of could assume that could shift, especially politically, but also just within the public eye. So the first plan came out in 2014, and then the Mid-Atlantic Action Plan came out, and we came up with our second iteration of the Virginia Marine Debris Reduction Plan at around the same time to be in line with the Mid-Atlantic Action Plan. Okay, so again, that low-hanging fruit, what are the 4 goals of the Virginia Marine Debris Reduction Plan? Well, consumer debris, that's the big one. All of that trash we find during cleanups, during the ICC, all those things that our consumers could reduce or reuse, recycle, plastic cups, food wrappers, things like that. The big one right now, and the up and coming, we heard about it a lot already this morning, was the abandoned and derelict vessels. I had no idea until this year what a huge problem that is. Learning so much about that. Derelict fishing gear, again, if you've been out on the beach, you find fishing line, ghost nets, ghost pots, traps, things like that. And then, of course, another up and coming is the microplastics and the microfibers. So these are the goals. We want to understand, mitigate, and prevent these 4 types of debris. Well, how do you do that? Well, we come up with some strategies. I'm not going to read these to you. Basically, prevention, infrastructure, education, outreach, and in this session, policy is one of the big ones. Not just in this session, overall. and removal. And what we do with each goal is we come up with a set of actions. Again, what's going to be socially, economically, and politically feasible? What are groups and organizations already doing? What are the gaps? What do we need to fill in? And who's going to do it? So we assign leaders and we assign groups that are already willing to do it or are already doing these actions. We have about 90 actions in the current plan right now. And I leave you, Joe, 4 minutes to talk about the next Virginia Marine Debris Reduction Plan.
Yes, so the reason why we are talking about this at this summit is because we are currently preparing for the next 5-year action plan for 2026 to 2030. And that is a very lengthy process. So I'm going to go through that so you have an idea of how we are creating the next plan so you can do it in your states. This process started back in March with the Virginia Marine Debris Summit. Much like this, just more exclusive to Virginia. Yes, I used that word intentionally. Exclusive. And so during that Marine Debris Summit, we did breakout sessions like the collaborative sessions we had today, but for the 4 main groups, the 4 main marine debris types. And we got feedback about what people are already doing, what they had accomplished based on the 2021 to 25 plan. And then we just took all of that data a few months later and went through it all to find common themes, to match it to the current actions, and that began the rewrite process. The feedback that we got from that summit really formed around 4 main topics of economics, capacity, engagement, and policy. Understandable. We could all come up with that. We understand that. But that leads into the rewrites in the beginning of the summer. We then took those rewrites to our partners and any people we could get across the state to get more input on these rewrites, to find out what we're missing or what they want to be involved in. And then we are still going through these input sessions. We had a number of types of input sessions to get all different voices, like whoever could attend, in person, virtual, debris type. Just we made it very possible, very available to get input. We are going through all that data right now. Then we will do some more rewrites. We are going to start finding leads and partners and going back to them with these rewrites to say, hey, are you sure you want to be a lead or partner on this one? Please. And then we're hoping to release it by early next year. And that leads into these actions, what's new in the 2026 to 2030 plan. You can see there are a lot of new actions in addition to the ones that we're carrying over, so that we want to keep working on. But there's a lot of new ones, and then a lot of focal areas in each debris type. And these, again, are based off of feedback that we've gotten. So it is a running list of outreach events. We want to focus on new topics for education, coordinate with more regional work, and focus more on upstream education and solutions. Thank you. We won't take questions right now.
All right, we're jumping right into this because I have a lot to talk about. I love this picture of the semi-deflated latex balloon with plastic ribbon in the rack line right near the horseshoe crab molt, if everybody could see that. It tells a compelling story about the potential interactions and hazards posed by balloon litter to wildlife. Most people don't realize the unintended harm balloons cause when they're intentionally released, especially lawmakers presented with no balloon release legislation. It is one of the many barriers. Hold on. Oops. Wait, sorry. I'm trying to figure out how to scroll down my notes. Any help? How do I scroll down my notes? Because I have a lot to say.
If you can drag that down.
Okay, great. Yes, I am one of those dinosaur computer users, so using a scroll bar is still hard. So let me go back up. Sorry, bear with me, please. There we go. Most people don't realize the unintended harm balloons cause when they're intentionally released, especially lawmakers presented with no balloon release legislation. It is one of many barriers we face when lobbying to pass this interesting law at the state or local levels. While raising awareness and educating folks about this issue is important to encourage responsible balloon practices, passing no balloon release laws sets a standard and gives it legitimacy. Sometimes letting people know about a law is enough to discourage the behavior. Simply telling a school, hey, did you know that that it's illegal to release balloons is enough to change a practice. So education is super important. When we told this one elementary school they blew bubbles instead at graduation, which is a great eco-friendly alternative to plastic balloon litter. And yes, even the latex seen here is considered a single-use plastic after it's infused with polymers, plasticizers, and chemicals to increase its tensile strength and prolong its inflation duration. Today we'll talk about balloon legislation efforts in the United States, the pros and cons of no balloon release laws versus prohibiting balloon sales entirely. We'll discuss why balloon laws are needed, the challenges and barriers we faced in passing them, and the surprising turn in California law that removed a significant barrier to passing no balloon release laws in the U.S. I'll share a few examples of wins and fails at the state level and how Marco's Marine Debris Work Group, hold on, I'll figure this out. Clearly, I'm going over my time today, Jess. Oh, good. I'll share a few examples of wins and fails at the state level and how Marco's Marine Debris Work Group can be a valuable resource for networking and advocating for legislation. I've included some QR codes on the slides, and eventually I'll get this over to Huva. It's estimated over 1 million balloons are released for memorials and celebrations every year. Balloon releases are ingrained throughout our culture and over the last years have been used at vigil ceremonies for victims tragically lost to gun violence. While some don't know about balloon litter impacts, others feel balloons are an insignificant issue compared to larger problems like gun regulation, broader pollution, and the climate crisis. These are just two of the barriers that we face when advocating for no balloon release bills, and that is just the beginning. Yes, so let's talk about the challenges of passing no balloon release bills and the types of barriers we face. Balloon releases are ingrained in our culture, used for celebrations and memorials. There's a lack of awareness about the impact of balloons on animals and the environment, the hazards of electrically conductive balloons, and the fires, utility, and infrastructure outages they cause that impact our quality of life, interrupt our businesses, and lead to economic loss. Oops, okay, I'm just going to skip ahead. This is a quote of the day. Laws are essential for establishing rules and behavior. A legislator sponsoring or lobbying for a no balloon release bill law has a unique barrier, even a pain point they must be prepared for called the laugh test. Take this quote from Senator Kavanaugh of Arizona, where balloon litter is a significant problem in the desert and national parks, posing a threat to wildlife, causing fires, and leading to power outages. In an interview with Pluribus News after HB 581 failed, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. The legislator said that unfortunately it could not get past the snicker laugh test. I am really, really sorry about this. Okay, I'm just going to wing this. Couldn't get past the snicker laugh test, and that is a big problem because the snicker laugh test is basically if it's going to get a laugh, and then you're basically saying that this doesn't really mean that much. It's just a big joke, and we have to get to a point where we can pass the snicker laugh test. Our legislative page is being updated to include talking points, case studies at the state and local levels, quarterly updates on bill and law status in the U.S. with links to Legiscan. We provide evidence of how balloons affect the quality of life of people and the natural world, as well as the economic effects and the losses from business interruption due to power outages. Currently, God, this is going to happen throughout my whole presentation. Sorry. Currently, research, news articles, data, and the statistics are located on our resources page with links to Surfrider's policy toolkit and preventballoonlitter.org. We're going to go into there are 11 states that have passed no balloon release legislation. 17 states introduced 11 states have passed no balloon release laws in the United States. 17 states introduced no balloon release legislation. And if you look at California and Nevada, they passed a balloon sales ban on foil balloons because foil balloons are electrically conductive and they cause fires and power outages. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of those case studies. Laws set expectations. They tell the public what we value. And they also, I think what's really important here is laws tell us how people should behave. They promote safety and encourage responsibility. They provide a framework of rules to guide citizens' behavior for everyone's benefit. That said, and this is really important, not every law is enforced every time, and they're not supposed to be. Do you get a speed ticket every time you go over the speed limit? Of course not. If grandma tosses out a plastic water bottle out the window, is a policeman going to fine her for that littering violation? No, he's not. And this is really important when it comes to passing no balloon release laws because enforcement is one of the barriers that we have faced. In November 2024, New Orleans passed a no balloon release ordinance specifically for foil balloons as a direct result of balloons causing a major power outage and damage to the city's infrastructure in August 2024. One balloon caused a power outage resulting in the sewerage and water plant pumps going offline, causing a nearly citywide boil water advisory for 2 days. Could you imagine a balloon causing that kind of damage? It is ridiculous. And this is when we talk to our legislators about this, you know, think about a densely populated area like New Orleans, Las Vegas, also out of power. And you know, when you think about it's not just the damage to quality of life and infrastructure, but it's also economic loss. It's business interruption. Let's pass that. So in the wake of this significant event and to prevent a repeat in Louisiana, a no balloon release bill was passed with bipartisan support. However, surprisingly, it was vetoed by Governor Jeff Landry in Louisiana, citing it was impractical to enforce. In his letter to the bill sponsors, he wrote, "My authority is to see that the laws of this state are faithfully executed. With this power to veto bills that are impossible or impractical to execute," he added, perhaps mockingly, "if signed into law, police are going to have to go and find out where these things happened, and there's going to be finger pointing, and people are going to be, you know, I don't want to get a fine," and it turns into this whole big thing. And I thought it was really important to highlight that, you know, these bills are not about enforcement, it's about behavior and just saying this is the expectation that we have, and we believe that this is important. So the surprising California plot twist. Data and facts were pivotal in passing a law in California in 2022 to ban the sale of foil balloons. I'm not going to go into the table, but you could see it shows power outages and fires resulting from foil balloon releases. Data and facts help prove the existence of a problem. In 2022, Governor Newsom signed into law a ban on the sale of foil balloons to protect from these hazards. I mentioned Las Vegas also suffered several power outages from foil balloons and passed its own ordinance. And then Nevada passed a similar California foil balloon ban law in 2025. And this made the balloon industry sit up and take notice. So up until this time in California, the balloon industry, the Balloon Council were fighting and lobbying against no balloon release laws. And then all of a sudden, you have California pass a sales ban law, which impacts the industry, it impacts profit margins, it impacts small business owners, and all of a sudden, now they're like, okay, well, we have to do a major pivot, and now the Coalition for Responsible Celebration, executive director is Maria Stockham, and we talk very frequently, like once a month, we have a calendar invite, and we talk about how we can advocate for no balloon release legislation together. And they also have worked on safe balloon practices and are trying to encourage that. And this brings me to how Marco, I cannot overemphasize the power of the Marco community, and you could see Sarah Weller's picture up here. The power of the Marco community and the ability to tap into experts for collaborative networking, resources, and partnerships. Sarah Weller from the Ocean Conservancy has been one of our valuable partners on many initiatives, and by sharing ICC contacts in North Carolina, we were able to galvanize support for a letter writing campaign for SB 20. With permission, Sarah gave us 8 contacts, which yielded another 20 contacts because North Carolina was like, you're writing letters? I need to send this to everybody we know. So that really further strengthened our initiative, so thank you so much, Sarah. Alas, despite joint efforts from the balloon industry, environmental, and bipartisan support, the bill stalled. But what was interesting, so the bill stalled and it has to be reintroduced in 2026. But what was interesting was AI said it passed. And we were like, and then all of a sudden Facebook and the internet and everything's exploding. And we're like, well, hold on a second. So the internet is going wild on Facebook. And even one North Carolina newspaper also published. We're just working on a legislative page I see I don't have any time, but I'm going to wrap this up really quick. No balloon release laws, we have a legislative page on our website working on a roadmap for success, not only for legislators and sponsors of the bill, but also we're building strategic partnerships with the balloon industry and creating up-to-date quarterly updates on how to get and understand what the bills are. But laws are only half the battle. It's really important, education, outreach, building those partnerships, getting the message out by posting no balloon release signs, establishing those new cultural norms, our sticker campaigns, collect, protect, preserve, and these are our resources, and just spread the word about responsible balloon practices. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all the presenters. You all were amazing, and it's evident how passionate you all are about your work and about translating it in a way that actually drives change. So thank you for speaking today. Thank you for the work that you do. You're all incredible. We are now going to take questions from the audience. If you have any, please raise your hand. There are going to be mic runners running around. You may have to slide your mic on. So opening up the floor to questions.
Thanks, everyone. This question is for Angela and anyone else who can speak to extended producer responsibility. This is the first time I've heard about this. I'm not really involved in plastics work right now, but I'm just curious about specifically, if or how Ocean Conservancy works with producers, and or I'm just thinking that producers don't want to take responsibility. I imagine they would try to avoid it if they can. So I was wondering if you could just speak to that, either the relationship you have or how this follows through in the industry.
Okay, great question. Ocean Conservancy was particularly engaged in California on SB 54. That predates my time at Ocean Conservancy, so also happy to connect you to my colleague who is just deep in the weeds on that one. But I'd say EPR has gotten support. I mean, it's been passed in 7 states, and it has gotten support. The concept has gotten support from producers and industry because of how it lets them get material back to meet their post-consumer recycled content. You also hear them talk about this idea of leveling the playing field. So you have some leaders in the industry who are trying to implement sustainability practices and make their products more recyclable, reduce their plastic use, but not everyone is playing by the same rules. So there are some encouraging trends there. That's obviously not going to be across the board, but I think that's one of the great things about EPR is there's benefits across the stakeholders. So hopefully that helps. I don't know if anyone else has anything.
I could add that, there's some obvious industry opposition on the point of cost. One of the things that they're saying is that it's going to raise the cost of consumer products because now the producers are going to have to bear the cost of disposal and recycling of their packaging. And so that's a important messaging point for everyone who advocates for EPR to think about. And Angela's pointed out all the countervailing benefits, many benefits of EPR, and much of industry is supportive, but there are obviously producers who are not happy about this trend. And I think it's the consumer cost button that they're trying to push. And so, in some of our work, we are thinking about messaging and thinking about what we all need to say as advocates to counter that. And so that's an active pursuit. I think we all need to be thinking about good messaging on APR.
Yeah, of course you can.
Because I have to make comments. I wanted to tag on to Cynthia's story about the North Carolina law on social media, because I got caught up in that too. I was like, wait, what's going on? Because I've been following North Carolina. There are neighbors to the south, and I've been following Debbie and all her efforts. She has gotten balloon releases banned throughout the Outer Banks and that whole coastal area. But the really important point I want to make in a roundabout way is that all of the comments on social media, because it blew up, it really did. I kept seeing it. I was like, what is going on? And all the comments were overwhelmingly positive and in favor that this law had passed. And it was a lot of just positivity and excitement and, usually on social media it's very negative. So it was really a encouraging thing to see that, the majority of the people that were commenting on this situation were very happy that it had happened. So why hasn't it happened? It's coming. It's going to happen.
If I can respond. Yes, thank you. I actually, because I wrote on Facebook about you got to really check LegiScan and you got to really vet where this is coming from. So what had happened was the law was supposed to go into effect on October 1st. So when people went to the internet and they Googled, oh, did this pass? The AI said, yes, it passed. And then you had 4,000 comments on one line, just liked. And then most of the responses were good. And then you have why are we wasting our time even talking about balloons? And so because I had written that, WRAL reached out to me and asked for comments, and we did an interview. And so they did this wonderful interview. I had no idea it was even being going to be aired. And it ended up in this news segment. And then what happened was the anchor responded afterwards, Dan Haggerty of WRAL. And he totally diluted all the good messaging that was happening from the whole report as to why a no balloon release law needed to happen. and then juxtaposed balloons with the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. And I'm like, well, what are you doing? And then he invited, if you feel we missed anything, if you have any comments. And then in the middle of doing my presentations, I am writing to Dan going, well, here you go, in the length of a Bible. And I sent him this letter, and he responded back so warmly. And he said, we did another segment, which was even more in depth on the impacts of balloon releases. And so we have a nice little dialogue. I sent him our bubble memorial video, which he loved. Hopefully he'll share that.
And we do, oh great, Brittany.
So I have a question related to the marine debris reduction plan. Were there any unexpected outcomes as a result of formulating this plan throughout the years?
Not that I can think of. I mean, I think the outcomes are how many people are unexpected. I wouldn't even say it's unexpected that so many partners want to be involved in this, and so many are doing, such amazing work. That's not unexpected. It's just a great outcome of the plan. I can't think of any. Again, Katie Register did. Her and Zach have been leading the charge for years and years. So, yeah, no, that's my answer. Yeah, I'm sticking to it, yeah.
I can do part two. Yeah, I think there's nothing unexpected in a negative way. It's just been with all the input sessions, we're hearing things that we didn't think of, which is the exact point of an input session. So there's been very niche actions added that are still very important for marine debris work. And then other things just like recommendations to translate messaging into other languages. Yeah, that's very important, and that should be in our action plan as well. So nothing unexpected in a bad way, but things that not everyone would think of.
Good answer.
Yes, Will.
Okay, I know we're probably right up against the line, but
Right up against.
but
I'll allow it because you're moderator.
Thank you.
Facilitator of the whole event.
I wanted to ask this question of the group at large, so anybody can take it. But you see in the research that Steve, you were presenting, and in the examples given by Cynthia of lots of public support for things. Then you see the result of these things in legislatures. And there's obviously a gap there. I have theories on why that gap may be there, and I'm sure we all do. But in terms of strategies, do you have any thoughts or recommendations on helping to bridge that gap from general public to elected leaders who theoretically would see that and say, oh, I should be doing this, but that's not happening?
Well, I'm not an advocate, I'm a researcher, but I could offer a couple thoughts. I mean, legislators, after all, are people too, and so I do think that there's an extent to which if we can help them understand, I always think when you're presenting polling data or trying to persuade a legislator that the numbers are as good as they are, that's why I did what I did in my presentation today. You lay a foundation and help them understand why. Why are the numbers the way they are? And I think that the attitude in the public about plastics today is pulsating, it's profound. We all feel it, but not just us. The public is feeling this way. So we have to break through to our legislators and remind them, because they are feeling all of these same things. Unfortunately, they are captive of a lot of industry pressure and lobbying, and we all know that, and that's not a controversial thing to say. So that's why this legislation doesn't pass. But we can overcome that. And I think that reminding them of the reasons why the public is so upset about plastic debris and plastics making their way into our bodies is the motivator, and maybe making the linkage. I mean, we have the ability to take them out to the beach and show them the balloons and all of that stuff. And so, anyway, those are my thoughts. Make it real. Make it real for them.
I could just piggyback off of that. I think And that's one of our goals right now with our balloon campaign and creating on our website a legislative page that not only has the opinions, the data polls, right, from public opinion, but also the facts, like showing impact on infrastructure and utilities and wildfires as far as balloons are concerned. It's being able to tell that story and say, this is the impact, and then you could pass that laugh test when balloons hit the floor, and you could say, well, it's so much bigger than what you know, and fortifying those legislators with all the right tools to be able to talk about it and get that passed and voted on. Or even reach the governor's office, like in the case of Governor Landry, who vetoed the bill. It's not about enforcement, it's about changing behavior and, you know, getting, and maybe it's whether it's media attention or posting signs up, it's education becomes a part of that, you know, that CBSM, right? Changing behavior change. But it's equipping them with all the information so the governor isn't going to veto it once you get bipartisan support on it. It's getting everybody on the same page.
If I can just add two quick things, I think another, in addition to all of that, another thing is bringing evidence-based solutions that they can implement. So we know the problem, we know what the problem is, we know that people care about it. Having those policy solutions that they can actually turn into legislation, I think is really important, and one thing I'm really excited to hear us talking about here. And I think the other part is building these broad coalitions of support. So that they are hearing about it from different sectors, different perspectives. I think that's one thing that really struck me on the balloon presentation, on the wide variety of stakeholders that are impacted.
I also have a comment, of course. So, you know, 65% support plastic bag bans or fees, but how many of those 65% are still using plastic bags? You know, the majority of people support bottle legislation, but how many people are still drinking out of plastic bottles? There's 3 plastic bottles in my hotel room right now. Like, until we change the norm among the citizens, the legislators see what we are actually doing when they go to the grocery store, when they're in a public arena and, you know, they're at their meetings or whatever and everybody's got a plastic bottle. Well, if people are still using plastic bottles that often, or in plastic bags that often, then what motivation do they have to change the law? I think balloons were kind of easy because we could show the evidence that it was actually hurting animals. I don't think you see plastic bags doing that as often, and not plastic bottles. I know they're on the top 5 list, but where are the pictures? So I think, like, and we are the example. So when we are out and about and not using, I mean, I walked out of the grocery store the other day with my snacks for this trip, and I forgot my reusable shopping bag. I did not take a plastic bag. I did not take a paper bag. I walked out like this with all my stuff. And that's what we all have to do, and we have to influence people. When I sit down at a table with my friends, they all know they better not get a straw in their drink. So these are, you know, again, if the people in general, the general public, are not changing these habits, then what motivation does the legislator have to pass these laws? And we vote with our dollars, and that's what we have to do.
You know, this is great, and I want to underline, you make me think about what Cynthia said, laws are not always meant to be enforced. I just love that idea, you know, laws as a statement about what we value as a society, laws as a social normative cue. So that's what you were just talking about, you know, and so can we get our legislators to buy into this idea that they're not just followers, but they're leaders too, and that they can help change that social norm? I mean, if they agree with us, they can help change the social norm through their legislation. So sometimes they have to step ahead a little bit to do that, and so we can encourage them in that way to kind of think about using their legislative capabilities as a social normative tool.
Thank you. Thank you all. That was a great discussion, and I appreciate you asking that question, Will, because it spurred this awesome discussion, and I hope that you don't mind that we took an extra 5-10 minutes. Hopefully it was worth it, and I'll meet you at happy hour for a crush. Will, I'll let you take it from here. I think we can all exit.
Yeah, thank you again to Kristi and the full panel. That was informative, mind-expanding, and wonderful. And if I could just entertain you for a quick second before I kind of give the wrap-up of today. Just as coincidence would have it, or perhaps speak to the ubiquity of balloon releases, I was sitting in my hotel room last night watching trash TV, and I learned that in China, they use hydrogen sometimes in balloons, not helium, because it's cheaper. They explode. It's insane. It was crazy video footage. I was already cringing watching the massive balloon releases, which gives a lot of context to that stat of 1 million balloon. It was a celebratory town balloon release. It was horrifying. But anyway, they explode there. So fun fact for the day, not everybody uses helium. Okay, on to the actual program. I couldn't stop thinking about what I saw last night during that. So yeah, first off, when I gave my thank yous this morning, I left out a specific mention that is worth stating before the day is over. Thank you to our Delaware colleagues. You all being the eyes on the ground, working all the logistics from the local sphere and coordinating all of our extra activities and things like that. Just big thank you to all of you. We really appreciate it. But before I kind of round out the day, I wanted to just play a brief role of summarizing, I think, some of the themes that we heard today. And everybody made this way easier than it should have been for me, so thanks to everybody for that. But if I could boil it down to 3 things, it's the value of partnerships, the stories that we tell, and then doing the research to know what we're doing. And that research one kind of goes both to the actual science research, the technical side of things, and then also the equally technical, but audience research, to know who we're talking to, who we're working with. And so kind of just to give us a review of the whole day, I thought it was really interesting how Caitlin this morning kind of told us, we focus a lot on how we impact the environment, but don't forget the environment impacts us back. And something that I kind of thought about as a prong that pops out of that also is the policy landscape is something that kind of plays that same role of influencing what's possible in certain places and then what starts happening in those places. So some interesting trends there. And while we can't blow up ADVs anymore, we definitely learned a lot there about how it takes the power of partnerships. Cam's presentation about all the people it took to work on those issues together, just all the brain power that was up there of the things they're doing locally, regionally, nationally. It really does take a team, and no one group can do it alone. And so it kind of gets back into that whole idea of the power of partnerships. And in that session and in the sessions as we continue throughout the day, telling the story behind things helps make sure that people know the great work that you're doing and why that is valuable to continue to invest in. A lot of the things that we're all working on have gotten some good investments from the federal government in the past and others in the past, but those investments are not long-term. And so telling these stories is really important in that regard. And then back to this whole idea of the power of partnerships. There was the PPASS, there was the PPAT, there was all these different partnerships that really speak to the value of we all don't have the skill sets individually to work on these things, but when we bring groups together and we work on that coordination together, there's a lot that we can really benefit out of that. And so last thing is just knowing your audience. In our collaborative session on microplastics and microfibers, this came up a lot. If you're trying to help bring people on board, educate them, change their behavior, you need to know what's going to resonate with them, and that is just tremendously important. And I think this last session brought that home a lot, even though the focus was on policy. Ultimately, there are voters at the end of the day, and I think this whole idea of the public support for these things and the public interest in dealing with plastic pollution-related issues is so strong, but there's that gap in actually making the work happen. And kind of to Cynthia's point of, these laws don't have to be enforced, they can be normative. This last conversation that we had here about, there's a story in there. There's a story to tell there, but if I could wrap it all up, it relies on all of us to kind of come together and figure out where our role is in that and how we can support each other in carrying those stories forward.